right? You work more, you're putting in sweat equity, you're willing to do whatever it takes. And at the end of the day, if you truly don't have an understanding of what's happening in your business, then did you make the right choice, right? Or how can you maximize the decisions that you've made? Look at it from, and it's not just because one of the things I've often been quoted to say is I want people to stop looking at top line revenue. I mean, truthfully, does it matter if you sold $3 million if you have no profitability? Like, did we lose?
I'll give you this line. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king.
Yes, yes. I feel like a lot of business owners trade their jobs for a less paying job as a business owner, right? You work more, you're putting in sweat equity, you're willing to do whatever it takes. And at the end of the day, if you truly don't have an understanding of what's happening in your business, then did you make the right choice, right? Or how can you maximize the decisions that you've made, right?
Welcome to the King Dems podcast, where we share the stories of extraordinary people and dissect hot, relevant topics that shape our world. From visionary leaders to trailblazing creatives, we uncover the mindset, strategy, and grit behind greatness. Whether it's business, culture, or personal growth, we ask the real questions. This isn't just conversation, it's transformation. The King Dems podcast. Your next breakthrough starts here.
Music licensing reimagined.
We are live, ladies and gentlemen. You are once again welcome to the King Dems podcast. And today I have with me my friend, my mentor, and the female version of myself from the other side of the pond. Make welcome the money woman, Monica Roca-Quesada. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic today. I'm so glad to be here. I like that, the money woman. I think I'm gonna change my title, my emails.
Well, Monica is about to change her moniker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Monicker. Wow, interested. It's really lovely to have you on the show. I'm a newly minted fractional CFO, and you are, would I say, an oldly minted CFO, a leader, fintech leader, entrepreneur extraordinaire. Wow, you're welcome. And of course, on this show, I do great work with exploring the mindsets, the systems, and, the stories behind legendary leaders like yourself. And of course, bold entrepreneurs, people that are reshaping the landscape of our generation, basically. And today, you are actually a force in the financial strategy and fintech space. And you are the incredible moniker whose moniker is about to change. Roca-Quesada. Before we dive in, what's a song or quote or mantra that perfectly sums up your approach to business and life?
Oh, definitely I would have to say a song would be Beautiful Day by YouTube, right? And how it explores the duality of life, and really the duality of business, right? Of how I think there's everything can be okay and not, right? And how you have to keep your pulse on not just what's happening in the day to day, but also on where you're headed, right? And that's our role as fractional CFOs, right? Like we're really talking about the strategy of where we want to take our business. Where do we want to end up, right? Being forward facing. And how, in the change of political environments and the change of economies and the change of technology, right? Advancements and things like that. Like, how do you stay so forward facing? Like, what are the things you need to do in order to stay on top?
It starts from the mind. You talked about beautiful day. Interestingly, it's actually a beautiful day in Miami, Florida, and a beautiful day in London, England. What a fantastic, would I say, phenomenon, in terms of the climate, in terms of the weather. But also, everything begins with the mindset. I'm a Christian, a man of faith. And the Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The mind is the world's most powerful tool when we come to think about it. Your mindset actually informs your philosophies. And there's something I always say on the show, conceive, believe, achieve. But on my birthday 2 weeks ago, I think I did a little tweak to that, conceive, believe, strive to thrive and achieve. You need to put in that work. And speaking of people who are putting that work, you are a big example and you're also paying it forward. So what inspired your transition from traditional accounting to becoming a fractional CFO and fintech entrepreneur?
Well, that's such an interesting story. So for me, I've always liked, and I think most accountants by trade will say that, right? They've always liked structure,
Mm-hmm.
routine, knowing, right? Predictability.
Uh-huh.
And so I was fortunate enough to get my career started in what I would say is the best form of accounting, which is operations accounting. I've always loved to see how things work and how it relates to the finance of a company, right? And so I started my career very young. I was probably 24 years old and I was managing a department for a major cruise line in operations accounting. It was the most intense and still to this day, probably one of the things I look back on with the most pride in my career. Even though I've owned my own business and I've owned multiple businesses over the last few years, but I've had Agile Planners now for, we're going into our 12th year.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And I look back on that time and I think the, it was for me, accounting, well, finance and accounting, when it's intertwined with operations, even something like e-commerce is like a puzzle, right? It's like, how do you get the pieces to flow together? There's so many different moving parts and they're all moving at the speed of light. Like when you think about a floating hotel, right? How many transactions are going through a point of sale system at any given time, right? Or
Uh-huh.
think about being in a major convenience store and how many times you hear the register being scanned at the same time, right? Like those are all multiple transactions. When you think about that neurological base of transactions happening and how do you put them all together, that's always been something that I find mesmerizing, right? Like how do we
So
break,
many moving variables.
yeah, no, like how do you break that information into by the hour, by the day, by the week, by the month, by the year, right? Like, and how can
Big
you,
data.
yeah, how can you use the data to structure where you want to go, right? Not just I think one of the bigger challenges in the accounting world is there's so many different, you have so many different needs, right? Like you definitely need having a bookkeeper in the day to day and dealing with what's happening now, but your tax professional may be working on either what's going to happen in the future or what already happened in the past, right? But who's really looking at where you want to go, right? Like, what is the strategy to get there? I work with some amazing business owners, and it's always interesting to me to see how they consolidate their data, right? Like they'll always bring out a spreadsheet of like, I'm exporting from here and I create this table and I do this, right? And what I love about the fintech industry is how we're building tools to accommodate that, right? Like we are
Exactly.
literally building tools to be able to take that data and make it usable, not just in accounting and finance, but in operations, in logistics, in all different parts, even in HR, right? We can look at what is happening with the data points to figure out where we want to go.
Basically, data is the heart of communication. If you're giving me information to process, right? I process information in order to make well-informed decisions. And the ABC of communication is be accurate, be brief, and be concise. If you're able to achieve those, then we're having efficient communication. And that is exactly, what persons like yourself who are able to leverage on technology, leverage on AI, leverage on data solutions, leverage on ERPs, relevant ERPs to ensure that organizations actually do not spend or waste time and resources on needless, computing, needless data processing, and needless systems.
Right. I think with that C, right, with being concise, we also need to be curious, right?
Mhm.
And curious as to finding ways that may work better, finding ways that are more efficient, right? Like, so we went
Mm-hmm.
from an age of only having certain systems that we would be able to connect to I remember, I want to say back in maybe 2010, it was like the average business had maybe 6 to 7 applications they were using. Right now, if you were to look at some companies' tech stacks, right, like what is in there, how are they running the business, right? And there's definitely, there can be overlap. They all serve a purpose, but I think the key part is to be curious as to how to maximize the data and how to maximize how we're presenting it, right? Are we making better decisions based on the data that we're extracting from these systems, right? I think we have to be very open minded when it comes to looking at data. And working with certain businesses, you realize that we're in a different generational era, right? Where you will still have business owners that are very much like, this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way we're going to continue to do it, right?
Uh-huh. Stuck
Yet
in your
now
ways.
we also have, we've always done it this way, but is there a better way, right? Is there, like, can I find the right solution? And I think it's really important that we use our skill set to not only find what's already out there, but also to be able to build what's necessary, right? Like to use our um, creative acumen to how we look at numbers to solution, right? And I think that that's really what the role is going to be. It's going to be testing different theories on how we can use the data. Like the data, like there's just so much available, and it's still one of the things I love most is to break that down, right? And sometimes I would say sometimes the role that we play, right, is to ask the questions of how can we use this data better, right? Like trying to think of an example. We've worked with companies where something as simple as like monitoring leads, right? Like where are leads coming from? We use this information, we capture the data, but are we utilizing it, right? So you've been capturing all this data in your CRM, right? And where are the leads coming from? But are you actioning on what that data is telling you? That's the question, right? We see a lot of ad campaign spends, we're going to spend more on doing all of this, but when you look at the raw data, it's really word of mouth referrals, let's say, that are
Exactly.
right. Like, so what's
That
the,
is the most reliable form of marketing.
but that's the thing, right? Like I think we've gotten very used to, this is what we need to do, but are we using that data?
Data junkies.
Yeah,
We
we're
have in this
collecting
age
it.
and time. It's just
We're
data
collectors,
data junkies. You should be processing that data, to make a decision on where to spend more, what channel or funnel, to invest more in. But people just take this data up and why? So, like I said previously, data is meant to be collected in order to help you to make better informed decisions. Right. So if you are not utilizing data to make better informed decisions, then why are you collating that data? And we still have business owners as well who basically make decisions based on hunches and intuitions, right? Ah, that's a discussion for another. That is a discussion for another day. But it's such a great way to segue to my next question to you. About the biggest misconceptions that small businesses have about a CFO and what a CFO does, and why do they often wait too long to hire one?
So the biggest misconception is that they can't afford one. I think, right? I think that would be the biggest misconception. I think having a strategist, and that's what I would deem, I think we use the moniker of CFO, right? Or the title of CFO because people, they know what it means, right? But with it, they attach a very high price tag is what they attach to it. I often
Now
like,
you're sounding like Adam from the CFO project.
I mean, when I tell somebody, right, I almost don't want anybody to introduce me as a CFO. right? Like I truly don't. I love to be introduced as another business owner. I'm just like the person I'm talking to. I'm a business owner. I have the same concerns, right? The difference is that I help businesses make better decisions based on the information that we've collected from their numbers, right? Whether you want to put that as a CFO or not is, debatable, but that's really what we're doing, right? Like we're
I'm going to put it another way. You help businesses to mind their business.
yes, very much so. I think the question begs to what we were talking about, right? Like when you have your books complete, right? And let's say you have years of data, if you're not utilizing that data to make better decisions, then what's it there for, right? Like, sure, compliance is one thing. We need to file taxes, there's laws, absolutely. But there's so much information in those numbers that to not use it makes no sense, right? Like I often talk to business owners that have been candid and they're like, I'm intimidated. I don't want to look. I know there's something wrong in my numbers. And one of the things I used to say is I make business owners fall in love with their numbers again, right? There's so much power in knowing what's happening in your day to day. There really is. You get to make better decisions. Like what what good is it for me to look at my financials from a year ago to plan for now? Like I don't, I want to know what happened yesterday. I want to know what happened 2 weeks ago. I want to know what happened this week in the business. I want to keep my finger on the pulse, right? So that I can see how I can maximize on that, right? Like how can I take better advantage of what the numbers are telling me? Wow. That's in a nutshell what we do, right? Look at it from, and it's not just because one of the things I've often been quoted to say is I want people to stop looking at top line revenue. I mean, truthfully, does it matter if you sold $3 million if you have no profitability? Like, did we lose?
I'll give you this line. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king.
Yes. Yes. I feel like, a lot of business owners trade their jobs for a less paying job as a business owner, right? You work more, you're putting in sweat equity, you're willing to do whatever it takes. And at the end of the day, if you truly don't have an understanding of what's happening in your business, then did you make the right choice, right? Or how can you maximize the decisions that you've made, right? Like being a business owner, being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. That's
Exactly.
for, right? And I think sometimes it can be underrated of how difficult it is, right? Like I know for me, when I think about my business, it's not just my welfare, but all of the employees that work with us, all of the contractors that are depending on us, right? There's a lot of pressure. Wouldn't you want to maximize the information you have at your fingertips to make better decisions, right? Like when you frame it in that way, does it not make sense to have an extra set of eyes to help you think about your long-term strategy in your business?
Not just an extra set of eyes, but well-trained eyes. You know,
That helps you.
yeah, well-trained and well-experienced eyes, and that's exactly what we are as a fractional CFOs. But you have actually said that your business is a machine, right? Are you able to do a quick walkthrough or overview of the 16 parts that drive our profitability and how they work together? And I know you have, what would I call this now? A robust resource on this. And real quick, how can we share that with the audience?
Yes, it's actually available on our website. We'll post a link to it in the um,
In the description, so yeah, the
yes,
show notes are
absolutely.
below.
But it's more the best way to explain it, right? Is when you think I'll use the example of a printer. I think a lot of times in businesses, we start a business because we have a passion for something and there is an emotional attachment to it, right? Like we obviously, it's something we feel very strongly about and we want it to achieve, but we stop looking at the business for what it is, which is it has a purpose, right? And so, to give you an example, it's like a printer. A printer, it has a role. It's going to print, and if it doesn't print, then there's the parts of the business or the parts of the printer that we need to look at. Perhaps I'm out of toner. Perhaps there's a piece that needs to be replaced, right? But when you can break down the different parts of the business and how it should work, then you can triage those areas, right? So when we talk about the different drivers. We talk about drivers of right, drivers of revenue, and then drivers of cash flow. Like I think that's something that is least talked about is how healthy is my business, right? If tomorrow there's a crisis of some sort, right? Let's go back to the pandemic where, if you were a hospitality business and you were selling, a restaurant and people couldn't come into your restaurant anymore, right? What were you going to do? What were your options? Cash flow and profitability are your rainy day bank, right? And it's not, we get so caught up in the day to day and can I meet my expenses for this month? But what is your plan long term, right?
Hmm.
A year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what's your exit plan in your business, right? And if you want to truly look at your business as a machine, right, then you need to be planning for that. And you need to plan for, what is my business truly worth, right? If I were going to sell my business today, it's going to be it's going to be based on the profitability of the business, right? I mean, you could sell it for parts if you have a great client base, lots of inventory, right? But if you want to sell it as a whole, then you have to make sure that it's healthy enough and that it's profitable and that there's cash flow, right? And those are the things that get overlooked, particularly in a small business and in startup business.
Exactly. Like no controls and management override of controls where the controls even exist. It's quite a very, very interesting terrain. But how should businesses approach financial forecasting in today's uncertain economy?
By leveraging the data, right? Leveraging and looking at the data in different ways. I think we often look at our financials as this is what we sold in the last month, and that's a way to forecast for sure. But do we understand why? Do we understand what we need to tweak? Do we understand what we can do better? Right? Looking at the entire picture of what's happening.
What are the drivers?
Yeah, definitely looking at the drivers, breaking them down. Most of the time, if you talk to a business that's struggling, their answer is always, "I need to sell more." Right? That's always the answer. I need to sell more, and that's possibly not right. Like maybe I need to increase my price. Maybe I need to negotiate my cost. Maybe I'm holding too much inventory. Right? Like who's who's looking at all of those different levers? And I think there's a huge misconception about whose responsibility that is. A lot of times we'll talk to a business owner and they're like, but I have a bookkeeper. Are we clear on the scope of what the bookkeeper's responsibility is? Or when we have entry conversations, they'll say, but I have a CPA. Okay, but is that included in the scope, right, of what the CPA is doing for you? Are they going to be monitoring profitability, cash flow, right? Not to say that they can't, right? And not to say that a bookkeeper can't either. It's just, is this included in the scope? And is it even on your radar, right? I often say nobody gets into business to do their bookkeeping, right? Like nobody's ever like really excited about, yes, I need to reconcile my bank account, right? But if we could get excited about the data that's in there, right? Like, and what it tells us, then maybe we would have a different perspective on looking at the numbers, right? Maybe we would be more excited to truly forecast where we want to go, right? Because forecasting isn't just, I mean, it can be how much money are we going to make, right? But if I tweak, if I make one change, if I touch one driver, right? So if I lower my cost, right? I'm pulling a lever in my business. If I raise my price, I'm pulling a lever in my business. What happens if I touch them all? Right? Like if there's 16 different drivers and I can tweak them all just a little bit, right? My business can have a completely different outlook than what I thought.
So you could be having pretty much a simulation on your business. Of course, you're actually adjusting multiple variables at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing is, do we have our pulse on those variables, right? That's the question. We get stuck in, I've always paid X for this, right? Or I have a great relationship. Like, did we try? Did we try to have a different conversation, right? Do we have stretch goals for ourselves, right? Like one of the things that I think is the biggest killer of business is getting comfortable.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, what a way to branch out to my next question. And it is, what three things do you think business owners should stop or start doing if they want to scale up profitability?
So I think this is the greatest thing for any human to do, right? Is approach everything with curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of times that we believe we know the answer, right? And we're not open to something being different or changing something because we've always done it this way. It's traditionally been done this way, right? And we live in a time where I think that that's, who thought, what was it, 2 years ago that AI really became used? Like, I'm seeing teenagers in high school that are having conversations with ChatGPT now, right? Like, who thought that that would be where we are now? If we don't approach everything we do with curiosity, we could be leaving something on the table, right? I think if we're gonna, I would want to see people embrace, I know nothing, right? Like, show me your way, show me what you know. How can I leverage what I know, what you know? How can we put it together to make something versus being in a position of, I know what I need to do in business, right? Like, and I think that even for us as advisory professionals, that's an interesting place to be, right? Like, when you have a conversation with someone, like, well, okay, explain to me why that's happening. Like, why do you think that's happening, right? Like, or show me how the data points you there, right? Like, give me physical proof of how we got to that, right? Like, but these are conversations that should be had, right? Like, we can build just about any tool right now. You can have
Exactly.
AI compute the most complex things, right? Just by having a conversation. It's not even like it's like I want to input this data and I want to look at the data that way, right? Like, if we're not curious about what we can do with that, then we're gonna leave stuff on the table for sure.
Wow. So speaking of leaving stuff on the table, what is on the table right now is strategic advice for new CFO firms. And of course, I am on that table. So as someone who's just, launched their new fractional CFO service, and, what foundational systems, mindset shifts or habits would you recommend for them to focus on?
For I would say that you have to have your your processes
Mm-hmm.
systematized, right? It has to be repeatable. I think the challenge with growing into advisory service is it is part of what most accounting and finance professionals already have in their wheelhouse, right? It's about setting up a way to systematize that information and make it repeatable for multiple clients. It doesn't matter
And
the industry.
scalable as well.
Correct, right? It doesn't matter the industry per se, right? And that's the beauty of the numbers. The numbers are the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
regardless, right? Your benchmarks may be different, but how am I looking at all of the different parts of my business, right? At all the different drivers. How am I looking at that data and able to consolidate that and put it in a way that is understandable and, more than understandable, actionable? I think
Mm.
that's the thing, right? Because having access to the data and not making a decision or change is almost criminal, right? Like, it's like, if you have all these data points, and what am I doing with it? And that's what we're really trying to. That's what we're doing with advisory service, right? Is that we're presenting the data in a different way.
For assurance services, the emphasis is more on the accuracy and the understandability of the data, right? On the other side, you also need to ensure that the data is actionable
Mhm.
and understandable because you're actually making recommendations, and not just making recommendations, you're making recommendations that are to be actioned in order for that business to move to the next level.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's where the guiding your client comes from, right? Like, meeting them where they are, because at the end of the day, this is something that you've been doing for how long have you been in the field? I'm embarrassed to say how long I've been in it, but how long have you been in the field?
I'll say going on 7 years now. Yes, 7+ years now. So it's
Great. So even
Second
the
nature
amount of
already.
information, right? The amount of knowledge you have in being able to support a business, right, can be overwhelming to someone that isn't as familiar, right? And so I think we need to also keep our pulse on meeting people where they are, right? Like this is new, it's different. We're looking at data different. Let's be curious, right? There's ways to look at this from a different perspective, right? Where someone might see a challenge, you may see an opportunity.
And that's actually very, very true. You know, so back to the framework about the business acumen, the global acumen, being able to work with cross-functional teams, right? That helps you identify opportunities across the board, and building relationships would actually help you to action those uh recommendations that come by way of the opportunities that you spot out. So it's all just moving variables, different moving parts together, and you need to figure out how to fit them together and ensure a proper balance for yourself and for your clients. But what would you say is like one big mistake that many new CFO consultants make when starting out, and how is the best way to avoid it?
So one of the things I think the bigger challenge is that they think they don't know enough, right? Or they're not leveraging the years of experience they have under their belt, right? I spoke briefly about my time working at a cruise line, right? Like that, the amount of knowledge that I gained from that experience, right? Like unless you did the same thing or worked in a similar situation, you wouldn't have that knowledge. Don't underestimate the experience that you have, right? Or different opportunities. One of the reasons I opened up my own firm was it's such a taboo thing to say, but you can get tired of doing bank reconciliations month after month, right? Like
Exactly.
what what did I find interesting is learning about different businesses, right? Like, so, I mean, I can probably tell you, I worked for a diaper manufacturing company. I had no idea that in 3 minutes they could make over 400 diapers, right? Like, so
Wow.
there's a lot of data, right, that you can extract. And that's what I find interesting, right? So never underestimate because, I meet people or I meet other financial professionals that are like, oh yeah, but I'm just an accountant. And I'm like, what? Right?
How do you mean? I hate that. I seriously dislike that, but our people do that a lot. Good luck.
Or they're like, well, I'm a bookkeeper or I'm a CPA. And I'm like, I don't know. I am a numbers wizard, right? Like I can take those data points and be able to construct a different plan or think of a different way to do things. Or it's about leveraging the information, right? Like I think we like to put it in a pretty little box of what this looks like and we want to give it a title. And that's the challenge, right? With saying that I'm a fractional CFO or a CFO or whatever it is. It's like at the end of the day, I'm here because I want to help you and your business succeed. I want to help you plan out that strategy to be able to get to where you want to go, right? Like a lot of times we get disconnected in our businesses from our why. Why did we start the business, right? Like, why did you start your firm? What was your
Basically, to help our businesses reach the next level, and be resourceful to those businesses, and win-win. My business philosophy is win-win. When you add value to an entity, they are happy to give you value because money is a store of value. So the only way to get it is to make people happy by way of you being resourceful to them. That's the easiest way to make money in my business philosophy. When you give people value, they are happy to give you back, some value in return. And win-win is the best way to grow and the most sustainable way to grow in any form of business. I stand to be corrected, or do you have any opposition to that philosophy?
No, no. As a matter of fact, I find that interesting, right? Because what you're saying is that what's important to you is the value and the exchange, right? The energy exchange. Because I do think that money is current. It's energy, right? And so that's the exchange, right? For me, very similar to what you said. I want to see businesses succeed, right? Like I feel everyone has a specific skill set, right? And you need multiple different skill sets to successfully operate and stay in business term, right? And so to say that I may not be the best person for you if you were trying to do a pay-per-click campaign, definitely out of my wheelhouse, right? But my relationships with people that can do that, right? Or knowledge that I've seen, numbers that we've run, all these things may still help your business, right? And the more people that you have that can add that type of value, the more successful your business will be.
Exactly. Interesting. So what's the best way, to stand out? Because for me, I believe in being different, and being different is what makes you to stand out. So how do you position, yourself for success and, this increasingly competitive financial services space?
I would say that would be I place a lot of emphasis on building relationships, right? Not like this is like finding a business advisor, right? For your business is often like finding a doctor or a therapist, right? Like it has to be the right person, right? The person that
Wow. Do you know why I'm laughing? I was chilling with my doctor friend yesterday. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He's been on this podcast before, Dr. Abdul Jabbar Hamza. Shout out to him. And, I was telling him, you're a doctor of bones. Or, bro, I'm a doctor. I'm a financial doctor, bro. I check the pulse, I check the health status of organizations. So put some respect on my name, brother. And you're confirming it today. God bless you. Monica, the body woman.
with there are a lot of people in the space, right? But not
Mm-hmm.
everyone is going to be the right fit for your business, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like I never see it as competition. I think there is the right person for every business, right? And
Uh-huh.
that is going to be determined by the relationship that you build and the impact that you're able to have, right? Because if someone doesn't want to get on a call with you because they don't vibe, they don't feel the same energy, right? Is that going to be a successful relationship? Even if you have the best skill set in that market, right? If I can't reach you because we're not on the same page, then how can I impact your business, right? So for me, I think it's about connecting with people, building a relationship, right? And being in a space where you feel like not only they can benefit from you, but that you can benefit from them, right?
Yeah, win-win, win-win always. That's what I always pursue. Like I love a win-win. That's just the best way everybody leaves the table happy. I don't want one party leaving the table happy and the other is leaving feeling, shortchanged.
No,
He does
I
it.
want whoever we work with has to feel like I want them to feel like they received value, right? I didn't just give them a report. I didn't give them a tangible document, right? Like we had a conversation. We discussed things. We came up with an action plan together, right? Like there's deliverables built on the conversation that we had. We have been approached by, and it happens a lot more frequently than I care to admit, where they're like, no, we want to work with a team that's just hands off. We never want to meet with you. Just tell us what we need to do. And I'm like, it's probably not a good fit, right? Like, because that's not the way I work. I'm not going to get the information I need to help you change your business, impact your business if I can't connect with you.
Exactly.
The data, the data tells you a story,
Hmm.
right? But the relationship and conversation are what shifts the data.
But you know the interesting thing, right? It's still part of data because we tend to focus too much on quantitative data, but we do get qualitative data of the relationships.
Absolutely.
But the qualitative data does not go into those, analytical tools. It goes in here.
Mhm.
We often undermine the qualitative data, and that's one annoying thing, amongst numbers guys like ourselves. The qualitative data does matter a lot, and it's good to see persons like yourself acknowledge it. How's partnering with incubators like Texters or aligning with, fintech ecosystems helped you to grow FynOps and Agile Planners?
Being a Techstars alum is probably one of the it was one of the greatest experiences that I've had. And also when you talk about an entire system that gives back, right? Like the entire Techstars ecosystem is on giving back, right? So you reach out to anyone in the network for a need, a question, a conversation. Can I pick your brain? And the doors open. I've never seen a system like that. And to be a part of it was great, right? Or is great because you're always going to be alum. I think that that's the model that we have to adopt as a society, right? We tend to gatekeep a lot of information. We don't want to share. And being part of an incubator, being a mentor in these programs, helping develop new technology is just an amazing experience. I can't even really, I don't think I'm doing it justice putting it into words, right? I know when we went through the program, we we met with, I don't know, so many e-commerce businesses that we wanted to get feedback from, and everyone, like, it was never a no, it was never difficult. Whether it was like, I only have 10 minutes, is that good enough for you? Perfect, I'll take the 10 minutes, right? Like, it's about truly being part of the change, right? Being part of building the next great thing. I think that in itself is a mindset.
It's interesting how super successful people do not hold back. They don't get keep information. And information is key if you are to progress to the next level or to anything. And that brings me to the concept of the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. You know, people who have that fixed mindset tend to gatekeep information, tend to live in that scarcity mode, right? But why hate when you can collaborate? If you close your hands, right, to hold what you have back, your hands are not going to be open to receive more. But I
There's
don't know.
the challenge or the opportunity, right? Like, sure, you may not want to give every industry secret you have, right? But even for us, like, I think as advisory professionals, right? Like, I give away more information in a conversation at a restaurant with a business owner than I would, because it's how do you build a relationship if you're guarded on what you're going to share or the knowledge that you know, right? Or how can you scale if you don't want to discuss where you're trying to get to or how you're going to get there? Or how can you receive, right, the information that you need if you're not willing to have a conversation or ask? And so I think these are the things that we need to keep in mind when we're having those conversations. I was listening to a podcast the other day where I believe what the gentleman quoted was, "Don't block the blessing," right? And I wonder how much we do that, right, in conversations when we gatekeep, thinking that we're going to give away something that we're actually blocking what we can receive.
Exactly. And of course, speaking of don't block the blessing, I think you were aligning with my thoughts, right? Because sometimes you're in conversations with people, you know, and you bring on those elements that you would probably have wanted to gatekeep, and they actually provide you with superior information or even just a little bit of insight to improve what you already have. Uh, speaking for example about yourself and myself, right? I did this course, bits and parts and strategies on my new company with you, and you did a great thing giving me a referral to the CFO project, and I spoke with Adam, a great guy, and I have been really grateful for that opportunity to be immersed in a very supportive system, you know, with all of that technical and non-technical support, business development support. Like, how do you get that if you don't open up in terms of exchanging strategies, in terms of, exchanging ideas? Like, you don't get what you need. A closed mouth is a closed destiny.
Right, right.
Closed mouths don't get fed.
Absolutely. So that's really interesting too. So being part of the CFO project, right? Like, I'm actually a mentor for the program. It is such a great program. I've learned so much. And even I know you spoke with Adam, but Jeff Prager is amazing as well. One of the things we talk about is there's so many businesses that need help, right? There's not enough people to be the change that's needed, right? So if you don't talk about what's helping you or
Hmm.
how you've gotten to where you are now, right? Like I was at a local event, and I want everybody to get what they need, right? Like I don't see things as direct competition in that manner, because not everyone is meant for me, just like I'm not meant
Exactly.
for everyone, right? And so if they can get what they need, right, then I feel that you will get repaid in different ways, right? And so you always genuinely, I always want to help anyone get, like, I am what I would call a serial connector, right? Like if someone has a need, whether it's I need printing done a t-shirt, it doesn't matter. I know someone that knows someone that can get that done, right? And I pride
Definitely.
myself on that. It's to be helpful, right? To
Hmm.
help people achieve what they need, right? And to be able to give in ways where you're not expecting to receive is one of the most beautiful things.
Exactly. I think with what you just said right now, my friends that know me would agree that you're the female version of me. You're just on the other side of the pond. Same philosophies. Yeah, and of course we don't just talk to talk, we walk the talk, you know. There's this book, The Founder's Evolution, by Scott Reitzheimer. He was a guest on the podcast. He basically documented the evolution, the journey of a founder from, inception to exits. And there's this phase he talked about, the shift from being a reluctant manager to being a disillusioned leader. How do founders know when it's time to stop being the doer and start being the builder?
So I think what is difficult about being an entrepreneur at times is that you are the visionary for sure,
You
right?
spread yourself thin.
But like for me, I am still very much a doer in the businesses that we have. I don't know that that will change. I think as you evolve in your founder journey, right, then there's things that you will delegate and give up,
Okay.
right? However, I think there is a shift that happens, right? Like where you acknowledge what you're good at, where you excel, and where you don't. And
Exactly.
there is a point where you have to step back and own that, right? Like, and own this is not my zone of genius, and I should probably let someone who excels in that space do that part, right? But it takes like owning your own business is, to me, right, like it is my personal relationship, my husband, my children, my grandchildren, and then my business, right? Like it is right there, like after the humans in my life. And it is hard to give up parts of your baby, that you've built, right? Like I think for me, I went through a phase of thinking that no one understood our brand but me. Like I couldn't explain it to anyone else. Like nobody's gonna get it. Nobody's gonna do it like me, right? Like I need to be the one that does all of this. I'm the one that does this. And now I'm like, no, how can I build these things so that someone else can do it? Because the truth is, there's people now on the team that do things better than I do in certain spaces, right? Like maybe there's like I feel like I always want to be a visionary for the companies that we're in. I always want to be a part of dreaming to where we're going to go, right? But am I the one that needs to execute all the time? Probably not.
No, and it leads to burnout very, very frequently. Yeah, it does lead to burnout. But for me, I've learned very, very quickly, that you need to be able to institute systems in place and teach people. Yeah, I think maybe because of my teaching background, if you're able to explain certain things to people and build a walkthrough, yeah, a well-documented walkthrough, and I think that helps to serve as a guide for people. Anybody with average intelligence is able to follow a well-documented walkthrough, and with repetition, you build
So I'd
mastery.
love to pick your brain on that, because we are structured individuals by
Mm-hmm.
nature, right?
Yeah, yeah.
if you work with, any type of SaaS software, right? Software as a service, there's always
Mm-hmm.
change, right? One of the things we
Mm-hmm.
talk about a lot on the team internally is SOPs, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
endless changes that happen. And how do you stay on top of that? Where do you fall on the list of documentation or SOPs in this ever changing landscape?
The only constant thing, is change, basically. And that is why I believe in constantly updating your documentation. But in the first place, there has to be a documentation on ground. Remember, I'm an auditor by background. Or aside from that audit background, right, I am actually a business strategist by nature. So even while I was in audit, I think I did have some managers from time at PwC who told me, like, you should consider being a strategy, not being an audit. Of course, the way you think, the way your mindset is actually built to be a business strategist. I never really got what that guy was saying until much later. Like, oh, there you go, because of value, right? So back to the question, right? Same thing with forecasting. You see how the landscape keeps changing, the variables keep changing. Are you saying we are not going to have a forecasting model? No, we'll keep updating the numbers. And yeah, so basically you can update on a ad hoc basis or a periodical basis. So basically you just try to find a periodic system that actually works well for that business model, depending on the frequency of change. So if we have, say, a quarterly review, right? Yeah, fine. But if we have any major changes, then we update on an ad hoc basis. So that's not the way to go on, my own side of things.
Interesting. Well, no, I think I've learned over the years that I'm more of a rule bender than a rule breaker. And so I think what I heard you say is structure is built into the updating of SOPs and whatnot. And so I'm just always curious at how other accounting professionals are taking that, right? Because I do feel like, particularly software changes so much now. By the time
Hmm.
you make your final edits on how to do something, it's often different.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, you just need to classify what are the major changes, what are the minor changes. So if you're doing on a monthly basis, right? So you could wait till the end of the month if it's a minor change, because you keep documenting these things. You have your Google sheet where everybody's collaborating on, and we're documenting those things and notice, right? So yeah, if it can wait, let it wait till the month end process. If you cannot wait, then okay, we update it. So it's still structural with flexibility.
Gotcha.
You're welcome. When we talk about founders, that are trying to move from being stuck in the weeds, to becoming visionary leaders who will build scalable systems and culture. Like, what's your advice for them?
And it goes back to what I was stay curious, right? I think for founders, particularly, sometimes we get, or I've seen it happen, where they're so focused on what they're building, it no longer serves the purpose and they haven't
Mm-hmm.
pivoted yet
Uh-huh.
because they're so focused on the end goal, right? Like a lot of times we have to stop and ask yourself, is this still working the way we intended? Right? Particularly in the founder world. And there's a lot of missed opportunities because I think what happens, at least particularly in the fintech space, is that you're solving for a certain solution and you're so focused on solving for that one thing that you can't see that you have something even bigger right in front of you. Right. And so you have to be able, like, I'll give you a perfect example. When we were building out FynOps, we had a target market that we were looking at, right? And if it wasn't because we had met other companies that were larger than what our target market was, we would have possibly never made that pivot. It was talking, having those conversations are like, wait, you're missing what you could actually build with this, right? Like, and I remember those moments of being like so headstrong, but that's not who we want to build this product for. This isn't what the intention was, right? Like you get very focused on your why that you might miss just how big something can be.
Exactly. And, that comes with the growth mindset, the open-mindedness. Sometimes when you just so tunnel visioned and you just focused on achieving a particular goal with a particular method, it keeps you away from seeing other possibilities.
Right. What? But the flip side to that is bad too, right? Like, because if you're not laser focused on the end goal either, then you might miss the milestone. So there definitely has to be a middle ground. I think the middle
Yeah,
ground.
definitely. I like that middle ground, right? And remember, even from my answer to you on the SOPs, right? You'd see my mindset is all about balancing structure and flexibility.
But that is a hard line. It is a hard line to follow if you're not. It's approaching it with curiosity. Like, what can this? Is there a
Yeah.
better way? Like, if we get, and maybe that is the growth mindset, right? Because if
Hmm.
we're fixed on something, but what is the middle ground mindset, right? Like, meaning, because at the end of the day, I've seen the same situation with founders where they don't get to the end goal because they change too often, right? So it's like there has to be, or maybe it's about who's on the team, right? Like maybe it's about the players on the team too, right? It's interesting, right? A founder's journey can be, it's a hard one, like to be a founder, to be an entrepreneur is hard. And while you may have a team, it's interesting how it can still be lonely, right? Like when you have
Yes,
decisions.
absolutely, because the risk and reward, lies with you. The risk and the reward absolutely lie with you. But something, I think I would use the growth of this podcast as an example. You know, what a great time to use as an example. Having clocked 10,000 subscribers just 2 days ago, and think about the growth that has been achieved, from inception till now. So if you look at the early days of the podcast, I was using a platform called StreamYard. And, I was always curious about how can we improve? How can we improve? And over time, I discovered, I was using a certain, number of tools. Uh, another tool called Oversleeps. That tool helps you to uh, cut your long form content into short clips. But I discovered it wasn't giving me the image quality, the video quality that I wanted. It doesn't export your videos in 4K quality. So why am I paying so much money for this thing? I started doing my research, discovered I needed to buy a, a 4K camera, right? So I did research, got the best brand on the market, which is Logitech. And of course, I saw the improvements with the video quality. And what else? I had to move from StreamYard to a platform called Riverside. And with Riverside, boom, the quality game changed. You could produce your long form and your short form content, with 4K quality. They kept on, improving on the technological features, even the AI features on the platform. And I'm like, okay, these are the guys that get the kind of person that I am. I am a progressive. I have an elderly friend, who comes to my place. He's always saying, well, anytime I come to your house, something has changed. There's always a positive improvement, and that's, the kind of person that I am. So we started with sharing stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things as a motto. And some people like, I don't like the idea of being called an ordinary person. I'm like, okay, don't worry. And we changed the motto to sharing the stories of extraordinary people and dissecting hot topics, because I discovered it's not just about the stories of these people. These people are coming to share education. So
Absolutely. It's funny.
we pivoted, just keep re-strategizing. And at some point, people got to know me almost, were identifying me with, with interviewing people in combat sports, because I do, aside from being a chartered accountant, a finance guy, I do have a background in martial arts. I used to train taekwondo, karate, and of course, I do mixed martial arts. I've had guys from the UFC, on this show. I've had the president of the BKFC, that's bare knuckle fighting championship, on this show as well. But I thought to myself, you are way more than martial arts. You are a businessman, you are a finance professional, and you're very vast and versatile. So what did I do? I rebranded again. I re-strategized into speaking with business leaders like yourself, speaking with, health practitioners, doctors, speaking with guys in AI tech, and basically more focus more on business, business, business. And now here we are. So over time, you just need to, as a founder, you know, change the goalpost over time. And that's what brings, that growth. Because if you just focused on a particular pathway, it's difficult to achieve accelerated growth rather. But then, there's a structure already, but when you keep welcoming new ideas and new possibilities. People tell me, "Oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you?" There's so many things people have told me, and then I said, "Okay, based on the structure, I just try to incorporate it, and here we go, 10K subscribers. Thank you guys. Your feedback, cheap has actually helped, to achieve this level of growth. So for me, it's about finding that way of balancing the flexibility and the structure. The structure stays, the same, but when you cheapen that flexibility over time and having this beat-sized adjustments over time. Yeah, we're still trying to achieve, that goal. And what was the goal I set out, to achieve? If you look at Spotify, the podcast is under the category self-help. So my two major goals when I started out was education and inspiration. So if I can educate people and inspire people, I think my work here is well done. And I think you would agree with me that those are the two things I brought you here to do, and you're doing them indirectly.
Well, I wanted to touch base on there's a really good friend of mine that I met in Techstars. I hope he hears this podcast because he'll definitely get the reference.
Wow.
But
Thank you.
when we met, I told him that my goal in life was to have an extraordinary life, right? And I
Wow. And you are the podcast that set out to share the stories of extraordinary people. Tell me.
there was a question that was posed, I believe it was yesterday in a conversation, which is like one of the things that you would give women in business, right, or minority owned businesses, or anyone that's like right now trying to build something. What would you do? What would you say? And what I would say is stop playing small, right, and realize that you were meant to have an extraordinary life. And when we block our blessings, or there's another really good friend of mine that says when we hog our gifts by not sharing them with the world, right, we're not only affecting our own path in life but someone else's, right? Like your story of how you built something or how you got there or what you've done to get to where you are now may inspire someone else, or it may help someone not make that same mistake. Like you don't know how someone's going to take what you have to say or how life changing it is. I think that what needs to happen is that we can't undervalue it, right? I think a lot of times we don't want to share our experience or our stories, right? And I'm like, no, I feel like we need to share more. We need to talk about the challenges that we've had, and not just the
Okay.
wins, right? Some of the losses. I think we go around saying that I'm a two-time founder. I think it's true. We're 9 times. We've had 9 different companies, right? Like who would have thought I owned a skateboard shop at some point, right? Things that you do, right? Experiences that you've had that have shaped who we are today, right? Like all of those bits and pieces are part of living that extraordinary life, right? Like just again, the not playing small, right? Sharing your stories is so important, right? You just never know who you're gonna touch.
And I am actually literally in the business of sharing stories of extraordinary people. So there you go. Bring your referrals because I'm taking it upon myself, to share the stories of extraordinary people and dissect hot topics, relevant hot topics, important hot topics, And I hope we only grow from here. Yeah. Cheers to the next milestone of the K incoming.
Yes.
Whoa, you've actually made waves both in finance and tech. And of course, you talked about being a woman, in this male-dominated world. So, what has been your experience navigating, these male-dominated industries, especially as a Hispanic woman? And how are you paying it forward?
I think my experience hasn't been typical because I live in a multicultural area, right? I live in the heart of
Lucky
Miami.
you. Lucky
Right.
you.
Yeah. So I
I want to be
definitely
like you when I grow up.
I will honor the fact that that is not everyone's experience, but speaking from my own experience, right? I don't, maybe it's also a confidence thing, right? Or maybe not so much a confidence thing, but a resilience and determination to share what we have to offer, right? That it doesn't I've had I have nothing but beautiful things to say about the experiences that I've had. And I have heard for a lot of female founders in particular, particularly in the cohort we were in, there was a lot of Latin American culture and the experience wasn't the same. Right. And I think what is important for women, for business owners, for any type of diver you cannot not focus on what it is that you're trying to build, right? Like you cannot play small and you have to show up with the energy of what I am bringing is going to change the world. I am producing something, I am building something, I am bringing something to the table that is going to change the landscape that we're in now. And if you can keep that top of mind, then your outcome will be more successful, right? I'm not saying that you don't have hiccups and pitfalls and that they're not challenging. They absolutely are. But if you keep your mindset of what you're bringing to the table, then you can overcome those challenges.
Fantastic. Uh, we know you're a very, very busy woman, and members of your team will come sheep you off the table very soon. But before you get sheeped off the table, are you able to give us a quick, brief story? I said it of a female entrepreneur whose story of utilizing smart financial strategy is actually transformational and inspirational.
Yeah, I'm sure I can. Of course, now I'm drawing a blank under pressure.
Okay, before you give us that story, right? Let's quickly play the quick fire round. I have five power questions for you. Just very, very quick answers. Word if possible. What's a financial tool or tech stack you swear by?
Controversial. QuickBooks.
Oh wow, QuickBooks. Okay, two.
I know. I knew it was going to be controversial, but I feel like
How about zero? QuickBooks or zero?
I'm team QuickBooks still. There are some things I love about Zero. I just feel, at least here in the US, Zero is more popular on your side of the pond than it is here.
Yeah, that's actually very true. You're correct. Absolutely spot on. So, what's your favorite business book or founder story?
Business book, I would. It's a, like I find it a business book and a life book. I would say Think and Grow Rich by
Wow.
Unemployed. Still one of my favorites.
Wow. I've said this on, this podcast before, but let me just tell you, I think and Grow Rich was the first book my father ever gifted me.
Wow.
Yeah, and I honestly, that book actually shaped my life. So, big recommendation to the audience. Go read Think and Grow Rich, and thank me later. I'll drop the link in the descriptions as well. Number four, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received as a woman in business?
Share your gift. Your story needs to be heard, right? Women have the tendency to show up, or at least in Latin cultures, I'll speak from Latin cultures, we're taught to stay small, right? And I think that that's one thing that definitely needs to change, right? Like show up with your gift, show up with what you have to contribute, keep talking about the change that you want to be. Those times are done, right? Of not, and I think more so is sharing vulnerably, right? Having conversations, true, deep conversations about business and life, right? And how they're intertwined. I think that we undervalue that. We no longer live in a world where it's like especially as an entrepreneur or business owner, right? Like I work from 9 to 5. That doesn't happen anymore. Like this is a part of my lifestyle.
For seven, I sleep with my laptop.
Well, but I think what's interesting is at least in this phase of my life, right? I still work just as hard, but I get to choose when and how, right?
Yeah, sense of flexibility.
Yeah, but that comes over time. And it's a learned skill. It's not, something that happens right out of the gate. So
It's an acquired taste.
absolutely. Um, Well, so for me, I think it's a line between personal and work, right? And how that line can be blurred, right? I think what's important to know that if you take your eye off one, the other will suffer, right? So oftentimes we think we have to work more to produce more to succeed more, but if we don't take care of what's in our lives personally, our
That
business
balance.
is impacted, right? You cannot build a thriving business while your personal life is in chaos, right? And I've tried that. It doesn't work.
It never
And
ends well.
it doesn't, right? But those are the things that we don't talk about, right? That we don't talk about. I mean, like you do hear people say that you have to work out for your mental health and things like that. But even connection with people that are important to you will help you thrive at work, right? And we sometimes
Exactly.
undervalue that.
Very, very true. People, please take note. So, number 5, finish the sentence. Wealth to me means dash.
Freedom.
Wow, I like that. I like that. Lest I forget the trait, right? The character trait I was thinking for you is actually resilience. Yeah. Resilience actually keeps you going and going and going. And of course, you are an embodiment of resilience. Your story, your journey, has actually benefited a lot from resilience. Think about what you would be today without that resilience. You just kept on going.
Absolutely.
To the audience, please go get the free guide, 16 parts of your business machine on the Agile Planners website.
And
Moniker
please
is
book right fit call. Even if you think, I tell people all the time, book a right fit call. Let's have a conversation. If something on this call piqued your interest and you want to have a conversation about it, please take me up on the offer and book the right fit call. You just never know. Again, what impact I may have for you in your business or vice versa. Maybe you have something impactful for me.
Just book the call, the money woman. Money cars got your back like a chiropractor. So wow, from me to you, I feel honored, having such a highly cerebral and natural business leader on the podcast with me today. I did not forget the story. If you still have the story in your back, you can drop it. But if you want to leave it for part 2, it's fine as well. From me to you, like I always say on the podcast, an attitude of gratitude is good attitude. And when somebody shares their time with you, they share their life with you. Thank you very much for sharing your time, your life with me and the audience today. A very, very big thank you to you. Love and respect from the other side of the pond.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I definitely can't wait for part 2.
Wow. Okay, fantastic. So guys, please, Monica, tell them to go subscribe.
Yes, I want to. Now I'm invested. I want to see as these numbers grow and change. I mean, this is an amazing podcast. You have so much to give, so much information to share. I really, I can't wait to see as it grows.
Well, thank you very much. And of course, guys, look after yourselves. See you soon.